Ever watched a man lose a war he never fought? Cut down not by bullets or bankruptcy, but by the small, lethal sentences that slip from his own mouth. The battlefield is quiet, the wounds are invisible, and the killer is each careless phrase. He repeats like a lullaby. If that thought already stings, stay right where you are, because what's coming will burn, then build. Words as weapons. Some men need no enemies. They volunteer for self-destruction. One swaggering remark, one lazy excuse, one smart comeback, layer them day after day and they erode dignity more efficiently than any rival could. They sound tough, polished, maybe even wise on the surface, yet underneath they're nothing but fear gift-wrapped in lethargy. You've heard the lines. Perhaps you've even worn them like armor. The Stoics warned us centuries ago. Speech is the mirror of the mind. Words forged from ego and avoidance don't merely float away, they anchor your life to mediocrity. Today we are not here to whisper comfort. We are here to rip the mask off 6 toxic phrases, lines that chip at your discipline, dissolve your respect, and hollow out your potential before you notice the rot. But we won't stop at exposure. We'll craft a stoic reply for each one, so your language sharpens your soul instead of selling it piece by piece. If you've ever hit send, felt your gut twist, and wished you could grab the words back, good. That tension is proof you're still alive enough to evolve. Smash the like button, subscribe, and comment below. I'd rather be silent than sound weak. Then breathe, because we are about to break the silence, before your own tongue does more damage than any enemy. Could. Number 1. That's just how I am. On paper it reads like conviction. Spoken aloud it's surrender wrapped in steel. Not surrender to truth or principle, surrender to stagnation. Men who chant this mantra have confused being immovable with being unbreakable. They freeze, call the ice integrity, and mistake a statue's stillness for a warrior's discipline. Picture this. A retired naval officer named Henry. Impeccable suit, silver hair, presence so sharp it seems to slice the air. Strangers respect him on sight. Loved ones live among the ruins he never notices. Each time his wife asks for openness, Henry shrugs. I'm not wired that way. When his adult son brings up childhood wounds, Henry deflects. We don't talk feelings here. No storms, no screams, just dust collecting on conversations that never happen. Eventually his wife doesn't slam the door, she simply stops waiting. His son doesn't shout, he goes silent. What finally fills the magnificent house is not drama but vacancy. That is the quiet brutality of that's just how I am. It masquerades as backbone, yet it's a prison sentence written in invisible ink. Stoic philosophy rejects such self-abandonment. Seneca reminds us, as long as you breathe, keep learning how to live. Life never ceases sculpting a man, unless he tapes cardboard around himself and calls it stone. Many confuse age with insight. One can come without the other. Repeat the same excuse long enough and you're no longer a man. You're a museum exhibit of who you used to be. A Stoic refuses that fate. He refines identity like a bladesmith hones steel, listening, adjusting, discarding the brittle corners. Of ego. Discipline isn't permanent shape, it is permanent sharpening. Say that's just how I am and you haven't merely stopped growing, you've begun decaying. The rot creeps into everything. Your sentences shorten, your curiosity contracts, your life narrows into routine and resistance, until one day all you have left is a weathered phrase and a guest list of people who gave up waiting for you to move. Stoic. Counter-strike. Who I was yesterday is raw material. Who I choose to be today is the craft. Identity is not armor. Truth is the whetstone. Evolve, not because the crowd demands it, but because your own conscience does. A glimpse. Ahead, if that first phrase cut deep, brace yourself. Next will Meet the man who mistakes silence for strength and buries every feeling until the coffin nails itself shut. The American Psychological Association links emotional suppression to higher risks of depression, heart disease, and early death. Yet the lie persists. Real men don't talk about feelings. Sound familiar? Stay with me, because every phrase we unravel will pull another splinter from the mind. And each Stoic antidote will teach you to wield language like a surgeon's blade, precise, clean, transformative. Question for you. How many times have you declared, "This is just who I am," instead of asking, "Is this still who I choose to be?" Let the comments be your mirror. We ended the last part with a truth that cuts deep. A man who clings to the phrase, "That's just how I am," isn't being strong, he's being still. But what happens when stillness isn't just identity? What happens when it becomes silence? Let's talk about one of the most widespread lies passed down from man to man. A lie so normalized, it's often worn like a badge of honor. One that sounds noble on the surface, but is soaked in fear underneath. Number 2. Real men don't talk about feelings. It's been passed through generations like an old watch, handed down, polished, protected. But this phrase isn't an heirloom. It's a shield, not to defend, but to hide behind. You'll hear it in locker rooms, in broken conversations between fathers and sons, in the silent tension of marriages slowly unraveling. It's never shouted. It's whispered in posture, in avoidance, in the tight smiles of men too afraid to name what's breaking inside them. Men who suppress emotions aren't being stoic. They're slowly bleeding in silence. According to the American Psychological Association, the cost is steep. Emotional suppression raises the risk of depression, cardiovascular disease, and even premature death. But that's not what they tell you in those Be a Man talks, is it? The truth is this. Men who cling to the belief that real men don't talk about feelings aren't showcasing strength. They're avoiding an inner war they're terrified to fight. It's not about masculinity. It's about hiding. It's the emotional equivalent of pulling the curtains shut during a hurricane, as if ignoring the chaos will make the wind disappear. But silence doesn't calm the storm. It traps it inside. Pain, confusion, and resentment begin to rot beneath the surface, until one day they erupt as anger, addiction, or an unrecognizable version of the man he once was. He doesn't understand that burying his emotions for the sake of respect isn't building him up. It's burying him alive. Misunderstanding Stoicism. Let's clear something up. People often misquote Stoicism as control your emotions. But control is not the same as denial. That's not Stoicism. That's avoidance dressed in philosophical clothing. The true Stoic doesn't numb his heart. He names it. He doesn't silence what hurts. He studies it so it doesn't control him. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, didn't hide behind power. He wrote privately about his grief, his fears, his flaws. He didn't broadcast his emotions for sympathy. He confronted them so they wouldn't rule him. A Stoic man doesn't fear feeling. He fears being owned by feelings he refuses to acknowledge. Emotional maturity doesn't mean sobbing in public. It also doesn't mean becoming emotionally mute. It means learning to observe what's happening inside you, quietly, ruthlessly, honestly, and then choosing how to respond from stillness, not from impulse. The real weight of silence. Here's the paradox. Men who say the least often carry the most. The ones who never speak of their inner life are frequently the ones most ruled by it. They think they're building a fortress by not showing their cracks. But in truth, it's those very cracks that let the light of wisdom in. To speak about what haunts you is not weakness. It's mastery of self. To say, "This is what I carry," not as a confession but as a command, is a strength most men will never touch. And if you can't tell the truth to yourself, someone else will end up living in the shadow of your silence. Stoicism does not demand your silence, it demands your honesty. You don't need to cry in front of strangers, but you do need to stop pretending you feel nothing. Because the next phrase, the one we'll explore now, is where avoidance turns into blame, where a man stops hiding from feelings and starts dodging responsibility. It's a short phrase, only 4 words, but it has the power to destroy character from the inside out. Let's talk about the man who, whenever life punches hard, says, "It's not my fault." That is number 3. We just confronted the reflex that erodes character fastest, blame. When a man defaults to "it's not my fault," he surrenders agency. But what happens next is even more dangerous. When blame turns into a quiet kind of entitlement, when instead of taking ownership, a man starts expecting rewards without ever doing the real work. Number 4, I deserve better. Few phrases whisper quiet arrogance more than this one. At first glance, it sounds like self-respect, but look closer, and you'll see. It's often resentment, dressed in polished words. It's laziness, disguised as self-worth. It's hunger for validation that hasn't been earned. The men who say this the loudest are rarely the ones doing the silent, thankless daily grind of actually becoming better. They aren't sharpening their craft, developing their mind, or cultivating resilience. They're just waiting for life, people, or the universe to hand them something cleaner, higher, easier. But Stoicism dismantles this mindset at the root. It doesn't play into illusions of what you're owed. It teaches that life owes you nothing, and dignity never comes from entitlement. It comes from what you build, regardless of what you get. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, had every reason to expect the world to serve him. But instead he reminded himself, "Do not waste time wondering what a good man should be. Be one." That line slices through entitlement like a blade. It doesn't ask what you've been denied. It asks what you're doing now, in this moment, to live with virtue. Because the man who constantly says, "I deserve better," is usually doing less than he believes and expecting more than he's earned. False confidence, real consequences. There's a particular tragedy in this mindset. A man confuses dissatisfaction with growth, but they're not the same. Real growth? It's uncomfortable. It demands structure, discipline, humility. Dissatisfaction without discipline? It just curdles into bitterness. When a man spends more time announcing his value than actually developing it, he's already lost the thread. He's replacing craftsmanship with complaint, humility with hollow hunger. The Stoic man doesn't walk through life with a checklist of everything he's owed. He walks with discipline, silence, and the willingness to do hard things without begging the world to clap. Epictetus wrote, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do." That's not just a quote, that's a map out of mediocrity, entitlement in later life. This phrase creeps in especially during the later seasons of life, when careers plateau, when relationships falter, when applause fades. The man looks around and thinks, "Why isn't anyone recognizing me? Don't they see how much I've done?" And the temptation grows more to blame others for not seeing his worth, to believe he's being overlooked or underappreciated. But here's the truth. If you spend more time demanding recognition than earning it, you've already stepped off the path. Seneca put it best. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And one of the greatest wastes, spending time demanding rewards for work never done. Stoic. Counter-strike. A true Stoic never says, "I want what's mine." He says, "I will become what I admire, regardless of what I receive." He doesn't need applause to stay committed. He doesn't need recognition to feel valuable. Because his compass isn't external validation, it's inner alignment. If you've ever said, "I deserve better," pause. Ask yourself, better than what I've become? Better than what I've built? Or better than what I've earned? The answers are there, beneath the noise, behind the ego, waiting for the discipline to bring them into light. Now let's move on. Because there's another phrase, spoken by men who want to lead, but only when it's convenient. It starts with a shrug and ends with a man slowly disappearing into the background. Let's talk about "that's not my job." We ended on a brutal question. Am I still sharpening? Because staying sharp demands motion, not medals. Yet the man who slips from entitlement often lands in an even quieter trap, doing only what keeps the wheels turning, never what keeps the soul alive. Number 5. That's not my job. You'll hear this phrase from men who've quietly stepped back from leading, yet still crave the badge of reliable. Outwardly, it sounds like healthy boundaries. In truth, it's avoidance, dressed up as maturity. These men shrink their presence until all that remains is obligation and routine. They confuse minimal effort with balance, trading usefulness for comfort until every ounce of value is tethered to a checklist and not one task beyond. Picture Ryan, an old machinist from Pittsburgh. 30 years on the line, never missed a shift, punched in at 5 a.m. sharp. At work, he was a model of consistency. At home, he lived by 5 words. Not my job. The dishes. Not his job. Helping his teenage son choose a college path. Not his job. Talking emotions with his wife. Definitely not his job. He provided, he worked, he paid bills, then congratulated himself for dependability. When his wife left after 28 years, Ryan remained in the same kitchen chair, stunned. "I did everything I was supposed to do," he muttered. And that's the tragedy. He never asked what needed to be done, only what was assigned. That isn't leadership. That's silent retreat. Duty versus purpose. The Stoics never lived by duty. Alone, they lived by purpose. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is your vocation? To be a good man, not a man who hides behind job descriptions, but one who sees a gap and fills it." Stoic strength means showing up when it's uncomfortable, when nobody's watching, when no scoreboard exists. Because the man who only does his job silently hopes someone else will carry the weight he avoids. The hidden cost each time you say, "It's not my job," what you really declare is, "I don't want to be inconvenienced by responsibility." You're not protecting yourself. You're forfeiting your influence. Power isn't found in what you dodge, it's found in what you embrace without being asked. Outsource your effort, and your value follows close behind. You don't become the man others lean on. You become the one they learn to work around. It is what it is. Yet there's a phrase even more corrosive, not because it limits what you do, but because it numbs who you are. It sounds harmless, even Zen-like, yet it rots ambition from the inside out. Behavioral science research shows one of the earliest signs of learned helplessness is verbal resignation. The moment a person stops believing their actions can influence reality. No phrase signals that resignation more clearly than a casual shrug, followed by 5 deadly words. It is what it is, and that, my friend, is where the quiet surrender begins. We just heard it. 5 little words, shrugged out like they mean nothing. It is what it is. At first glance, it sounds stoic, detached, even wise. But dig deeper and you'll see, this phrase doesn't reflect strength. It reflects surrender. Number 6. It is what it is. For men worn down by years of disappointment, by losses that never fully healed, by dreams that quietly faded, this phrase becomes a quiet death sentence. It's not acceptance. It's emotional resignation. The Stoics did teach us to accept what we cannot control, but they never taught us to abandon the parts we can. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will. Find strength. That's not a lullaby, that's a call to arms. But when a man constantly leans on 'it is what it is,' he's not practicing stoic endurance. He's practicing emotional numbness, a quiet disengagement disguised as wisdom. The cost of numbness, Seneca sharpened this idea even further. It is not that we have a short life, but that we waste a lot of it. And a man who uses this phrase too often isn't just wasting time. He's wasting conviction. He's numbing his sense of purpose and calling it peace. But here's the tragedy. This mindset doesn't just stay contained. It leaks. It seeps into relationships, into ambition, into health. And soon, the man becomes a stranger to his own life, watching it like someone flipping through a movie. He's no longer starring in. He's there, but he isn't. Present, but invisible. Composure versus capitulation. There's a difference between composure and capitulation, between responding with grace and retreating into indifference. A Stoic says, "I see this for what it is, and I will act within my power." The quitter says, "I see this and I give up." One sharpens you, the other sedates you, because yes, life will hurt. People will fail you. The world won't bend to your timeline. But none of that gives you permission to rot in passivity. So, the next time "it is what it is" rises in your chest, pause. Ask yourself, is this true Stoic acceptance, or am I just too tired to care? Because every time you choose numbness over action, you become easier to ignore. And one day you may wake up not feared, not respected, not loved, but simply unnoticed. And for a man who once carried the fire to be more, that's the cruelest fate of all. So, what now? Let's close with clarity, because once you see how these 6 phrases chip away at your power, the only question that matters now is, what will you say instead? Every man leaves a trail, sometimes in his actions, sometimes in his words. But the truth? Most people won't judge you by your plans or even your past. They'll judge you by what slips out when you're not performing. And these 6 phrases? They don't just sound weak. They are weakness distilled into words. Repeat them long enough and they become your identity. But here's the twist. That identity, it's not final. Not if you have the guts to face it, because weakness isn't the enemy. Denial, as Marcus Aurelius said, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. So if you speak like a victim, don't be surprised when you suffer like one. But if you begin to speak with clarity, even in private, even when no one's listening, you begin to rebuild something far stronger than reputation. You build character. A Stoic man doesn't talk to impress. He speaks with precision, with restraint, with awareness. And when he's silent, that silence carries weight. If this video struck a chord, let it, because discomfort is the doorway to change, and truth, even when it stings, is always worth hearing. Comment below. I choose strength over sound. Subscribe to Stoic Havenway for weekly wisdom that doesn't scream for attention, but speaks so clearly it echoes. Thank you for watching. Now go sharpen your soul.